Hello, everybody. I'm Jiménez. I'm the director of festival, and I'm very pleased to be with you together to present this Q&A of a movie that is important to us on the festival, No Man's Land, a film who talks about one of the biggest issues when we talk about the relationship between America Latina and the United States. No Man's Land address this problem, and it does it from a human perspective. And for talk about all of this, we have already here Claudia Puig, who's a very important film critic, as you already everybody knows. And we have all the cast of the film and the director. So please enjoy this Q&A.
Hi, everybody. I'm Claudia Puig. I'm president of the LA Film Critics, and welcome to the 10th edition of FIC in LA, which is now known as the Guadalajara Film Festival in Los Angeles. And thank you to our supporting organizations. This year, the festival has adopted a new mission to not only show the best of Latin American cinema, but also to open any doors for emerging Latinx creators in pursuit of cultivating a borderless film industry. I am honored to be your moderator today for today's Q&A. No Man's Land is truly a film that represents the essence of this festival. And here with us today is the director, Conor Allyn. Sitting next to him is Jake Allyn, who co-wrote the script and obviously plays Jackson Greer, and Jorge Jiménez, who plays Gustavo, Andie MacDowell, who plays Monica Greer, and Frank Grillo, who plays Bill Greer. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great to have you here. Jake, I want to start with you because you co-wrote this script with David Barraza. How did you come up with this particular story, and what was the impetus for it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Conor and I had been thinking about this movie really since we were kids. We grew up in Dallas, Texas, but our dad worked a lot in Mexico growing up. And so we would go back and forth a lot of times to Mexico City. I've been there probably 15, 20. I've never been to Cancun, but I've been to Mexico City 20 times. And, we really just felt like we got to see a different side of Mexico than all of our friends growing up and a lot of people in the States, period. And so when we got into the film business, we really wanted to make sure that was one of the first stories that we told. And then in terms of just trying to find our place into this world and our point of view, we really just thought that we could provide a unique story in doing a reverse immigration story.
That's fascinating. So Conor, how did you get involved in directing it? It sounds like you were working on the story for a while together.
Jake was really this was his idea from inception. And
I made him.
Yeah, he executed it. Yeah, he made me work on this. But we've worked together a couple of times, so definitely a lot on the writing side. And we've done one other movie that I directed that he acted in. But this was like a passion project for us going back for, I think the first script was written like probably more like 8 years ago now. So we'd sort of, in lockstep on this one from the beginning. We're just so excited that, that it finally came together in such like epic fashion for us.
It could be more timely. It seems like, of course it was timely then.
It's funny that you say that. We, as I said, we've been working on this forever. And every year that it didn't happen, we were like, oh no, it's so timely. We got to make it happen this year. And then the next year would happen. And then, certain people are running for president and calling Mexicans all rapists and stuff. And we're like, oh my gosh, it has to be this year. And then it just, unfortunately for the world, but fortunately maybe for our movie, this subject has just continued to stay in the news, gain, topicality. And hopefully we're still getting the movie out there in time to make a difference.
Absolutely. I want to ask each person about the character they played, and I'll start with Jorge. Your character is very complex and multidimensional. Oftentimes when we see people playing a coyote or somebody from Mexico, they're one-dimensional, and unfortunately those of us who watch a lot of Latinx cinema, it's a stereotypical portrayal of somebody from Mexico. And yours is very complex and it has dimension to it. You're a devoted dad. You're mired in grief. You seek vengeance, but then your humanity wins out. What drew you to playing this particular part?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Well, when I read the script, that's what I liked about it, that it was something different. It wasn't the good guy and the bad guy. And I was thankful to see that and read something like that. So, like you're saying, the character gives the opportunity to work these all different sceneries, which I appreciate a lot. Like you're saying, we got to, well, I got to play the good dad. I mean, the dad. There's no good or bad. I mean, I got to play the dad. I got to play to be a son as well. I had to play an uncle, and then the work that I used to do, you know, crossing people over. So it was a lot going on, and I think is you don't see that much in movies. Like you're saying, you can see like the good side, the bad side, the angry side, the humble side. So it was a full, complete character, which I appreciate a lot to be able to play and you know for the opportunity and the trust that both guys had on me. Um, so I'm grateful for that, Connor and Jake. Thank you.
Dude, you're
We
very
thank you,
welcome. We
yeah.
were lucky to get you in this movie, and you did such an amazing job. Really, just honestly blew us away.
Yeah.
And I know, you know, from a sort of actor to actor competitive way that, you know, Jake, watching you do some of your scenes,
Mhm.
I know he went back to the hotel that night and was just
Yeah.
like, well, I need to work harder. I've been working on this for
Yeah.
7 years. I got to do a little bit more work before tomorrow morning.
Mhm.
That was nice and it was a great experience. I mean, working with you guys, great guys, both of you, and then of course the rest of the cast. I mean, Andie, I never met her. Frank, George. I mean, everyone. I felt blessed getting to be on this project and you know get that chance of also showing what I can do as an actor. And this was a great opportunity for me.
Yeah, Claudia, I have to say, just to bring everyone into it, we were, in terms of being blessed with the cast and the crew, we had a lot of people on this movie that I think really challenged us, challenged me in a good way, and in the best way. I remember, Frank, we talked about this quite a bit, of just like showing up and like push yourself, push each other. You know, I casted that. We did that before the thing started, you know, on the script. We did that in post-production, sharing the movie around, you know, getting notes. I mean, the DP, JP, Juan Pablo Ramirez, who's terrific. You know, he was in this movie early, and he challenged us in a way that I hadn't worked with the DB before, that really made the movie better. And it was wonderful, and that's really why the movie, if it's modestly, if people like it, it's because of all that interaction between, you know, all the filmmakers on this movie.
Yeah.
I love the parent, and as a parent, I love the parent and child story at different levels, you know, whether they're adult parents, adult kids. And Andie, I wanted to ask you about your story, your character, because it's a story about the border, and it's mostly a story of fathers and sons, but you play a mother who is really devoted to your son and kind of watching her family be torn apart at the same time. What drew you to the part of Monica?
I guess the story. I think it's fascinating to tell politically, to be telling the story right now. I think that was the greatest attraction, and getting to work with you know, really good quality people. But I really didn't know what I was getting into, and you know, I play a smaller role, but I have some good moments, and that's really what you care about. It's, you know, it's not always the size of the role. It's the dignity of it, like the elevator scene. And when Conor came to me to talk about the elevator scene, which is really a small moment, but really very significant, because we both get in the elevator. We're both suffering. He's lost a child. My child is missing. And I don't know if I'm going to lose a child. And we're both suffering, but we're from two different sides. It's two different sides of the story. So my favorite scene in the whole movie, I don't say anything. It's a very quick moment. But I think mostly I'm proud of the movie after watching it, just because it's so beautifully done. The DP is obviously someone really talented, and I'm really happy for Jake and Conor that they connected with all these beautiful people and came up with a really good idea, but they sought out a great team. They really did. They found a very powerful team. So it's just a beautiful movie, and I'm glad to be a part.
Well, speaking of scenes that were very moving, there was a scene between your character and Frank's character that I was really affected by, where she says, "Remember when we used to drop off water and blankets down by the river? What happened to us?" And
Right.
Frank's character says, he basically expresses his confusion and frustration. I don't know what to do. Drugs, cartels are in our backyard. It's such a powerful exchange, and because it is a really complicated problem.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that as well? I'd love to have you both talk about that scene.
Yeah, I agree. It is a powerful, very powerful scene, and the reality of the situation is such that, and this is why I think Conor and Jake were brilliant in how they executed this. Everybody's point of view is valid in this scenario. People on both sides have valid point of views and are fighting for what they believe is their life, is their dignity, is their future. And so I don't see any of them as bad people. They're just in a bad situation because of what has become a political time bomb. And it was a great scene because it's two people who love each other and have kind of lost a lot. And it was kind of a difficult scene to do. As I remember, we were a little confused as to where to go. I was anyway. And again, just to tack on to what Andie says, I'm amazed at what Conor and Jake have done. I think they did a spectacular job and really rose to the occasion and did push themselves out of their comfort zones with this thing. And it shows. And I agree with Andie, no scene is pedestrian in this movie. It all works very well and it all belongs there.
And we wrote, if you guys remember, we were working that scene out on the day.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about that one from the moment that we all sort of started working on this movie together. And then I remember talking about those pages and working that out so that the whole water and blankets thing, I think, was a pretty late addition to the script. Frank, when you came on the movie, we talked about what was all this for? What was the point of it?
Right.
And Jake had come across some research of people. There was this very nice old lady who lived right on the border, and she would drag out a cooler. Yeah, she lived in no man's land. She would drag out a cooler filled with Coke and waters and blankets and Spam and stuff. And she'd been robbed before, and she just felt like, even though they had stolen from her, she said they need the help, and instead of them robbing me, I'll just leave stuff. And so we sort of took that and incorporated it, and have them talking about how they used to be, how these people that lived on the border, they used to be kinder, but then the problem got worse, so they sort of went the other way, but they wished, and that's the end. And then the very end of the movie, we see Bill Greer leaving, the water and the blankets out again.
Yeah, that's good. The other big problem with that scene is I have been a gigantic, huge Andie MacDowell fan for a long time, and I was a little
I didn't know that, Frank. I wish you would have told me.
I couldn't tell you because then I couldn't do the movie, but I was fairly intimidated. So there's
I had no clue. I was intimidated by you.
The mutual
I was also intimidated by Frank.
What's that?
I said I was also intimidated by you.
Now, that might be true.
I wanted to ask Vanessa from the festival, because to me that's kind of the heart of this movie, is the complexity of the issue of immigration, and how, you know, as Frank said, there are no bad guys. Everyone's trying to, you know, have a better life. And was that something that spoke to you in your selection of this film for the festival?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, I do have to say that our festival director, Jiménez, was the first to champion No Man's Land. And I think that we all understand where we are. We all understand the situation that we're in. But I think that we are also trying to, at some point, bring in different perspectives, you know, and I think that that's the most important thing, is that at the end of the day, if we don't talk about the issues, then we're going to be in the same situation. So why not open up the dialogue, and why not allow us to just talk about, just like Frank said, how you feel, and there's no right or wrong. And I think, you know, just to kind of add to that, I think part of what everybody's talking about is part of the reason why this film is so important, is because it also just talks about the collaboration that's happening behind the camera, right? We talk about the amazing DP, we talk about what it's like to shoot in another country and to be able to kind of cross-reference talent. So I think that that's what was essential about this movie, and we're very lucky to have it in our slate.
Let's talk about shooting in another country, because that is an interesting point. And you know, not only Guanajuato, but all the other places that he went along the way. Conor and Jake, did you have crew that was Spanish speaking? How did you negotiate just this, you know, the differences in language? And
yeah, everybody. Yeah, so we shot 100% of this movie in central Mexico, in Guanajuato, and where it's set. And you know, I think almost everyone who's from the States is almost all on this Q&A. George Lopez as well is one of who's not.
The whole crew is from Mexico.
Basically, the whole crew is from Mexico besides us. And we were the better for it. Both just totally standard filmmakers who are incredibly talented. Mexico has a very robust domestic film industry. And so everyone on the crew was incredibly professional and talented. And then for our film specifically, in order to do it as authentically as we wanted, you know, the only way to do that really well would be to surround ourselves with Mexican filmmakers, and of which we were very lucky to have, you know, great ones, both like with your writing partner David, or you know, my cinematographer on the movie, JP. Like, everyone was really talented, and they all understood what we were trying to achieve with the movie, and it was important to them too, beyond just, you know, working on a movie.
It's interesting, Jake, I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of those, you mentioned the sheriff, some of those other characters that are not, the actors are not represented here today, but George Lopez's character I was fascinated by, because there are plenty of people like him who are Latino, who don't speak Spanish, you know, who are Texan, and who've been here for generations, and might feel more American or whatever. They're just, you know, they are. And then there was the woman on the bus, who I thought was a really important character too, who says we're not all immigrants. And I think you captured, you know, the many kinds of, is more kinds of Latin Americans than the average American film ever portrays. Yeah,
I mean, that's definitely one lucky thing, and that we did on purpose in terms of making a road movie, is you can have these, you know, Huck Finn style chapters and meet new people. You know, it lends yourself to that ability, which is awesome. I do love that character. I'm glad she got some love in this. And then with George Lopez, I mean, that just goes back to giving everybody a point of view. We didn't just have a Mexican father or a Texas father. We had both. And I really wanted to have a character that was in the States, from Latin America, but that probably didn't speak much Spanish. And when he goes after Jackson into Mexico, that's probably his first time in Mexico as well. So we really wanted that present in the film too.
Yeah, I love the nuances of that. It was so. And tell us a little bit about your writing process, because you worked with David on this. Is David from Mexico, or is David Mexican American?
He's from Mexico.
He's Mexican.
So how did you work together on the script?
Yeah, I had written a first couple of drafts by myself, and we were working the script for, I think, 2 or 3 years. And then, you know, as things were progressing and we were getting closer and closer, you know, we were really just thinking about it. We were thinking, wow, you know, I think 80% of this movie takes place in Mexico. I don't know how I would feel if someone made a movie 80% in Texas that was from Mexico, and had just been to Texas a couple times. The way I had with Mexico, I don't think that equates. And so we just really tried to step out of it and try and find the right writer for the job, which was David Barraza, who was also part of how we came to Jorge as an actor. So, you know, right off the bat, it was already worth it for that, you know?
Yeah, David is kind of a writing acolyte of Guillermo Arriaga, who wrote Babel and Amores Perros, and had worked with Jorge. So it was sort of like a very lucky, you know, we got a writing partner and one of our stars out of that together, and it really worked out for the best.
Yeah, because a lot of times I was thinking of something like Traffic, you know, where if Soderbergh wrote it, then his dialogue had to be translated, and it just adds that extra step, which, you know, can work. But
the translation thing can get. I've done another movie that's in another language in Indonesia, and the translation thing can really. It's not quite. If it's not written in the first language, it gets really dodgy really fast.
Yeah.
It's just not ideal.
Right, exactly. I have a question for you, Conor, about some of those close-ups that you had on the land, on the dirt and the ants crawling. I was wondering if that was a metaphor or what this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's sort of like to, you know, I don't want to get too like artsy fartsy with it, but we're all just ants in the dirt. The dirt for sure was something that we like focused on. Just dirt. Just the ground, doesn't matter the ground or the ants. They don't know which side of the border they're on. They don't care. They're being ants, and it is one of those things that we did. You don't know if people really care about that, but it's supposed to be emblematic of, you know, some of the themes of the movie.
And on the acting end of things, for Andie, Frank, Jorge, and you, Jake, did you rehearse in advance or rehearse certain scenes? How did you come together as an ensemble?
We did some. I remember, you know, it was interesting with Jorge because we did have the chance to meet, I think, 2 weeks before we started shooting. And, you know, we kind of meet at the beginning of the movie in the shootout, and then we kind of go off and make our own movies, and then we come together at the end of the church. And so there wasn't really much to rehearse in that capacity. We were both going to kind of go off and
I do know for the church scene, you know, we kind of talked it out in advance, but we specifically did not spend much time rehearsing that. We just basically scheduled it towards the end of the production so that they would have made as much of that journey as possible.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think Jake and Jorge were friends, but sort of kept a polite professional distance in order to kind of keep that moment as fresh and natural as it could be. And then we shot that scene for like 18 hours straight and did it like a bajillion times. So, you know, a little bit of the
longest time I've spent in a church in a while.
Yeah. Well, so logistically, how does that work? Because, you know, they're sacred places and people feel differently about having.
We shot it. I can tell you one thing for sure. We shot in the oldest church in the state of Guanajuato. The church was so old when we fired off the blanks in the gun, the first time we fired it off, just a huge amount of dust paint sprinkles.
Wow.
Fell down on the set. It was very.
That was not a metaphor. That was real.
That must have been scary. Here's this beautiful old church, and it's like, oh no.
And yeah, we just have to do that 20 more times, and it's fine. Yeah, but it makes you, when you're in a place like that, that has like this aura about it, like church. I don't know. It really focuses you in, and you sort of feel the essence of the place, and it makes you really, I don't know, pay attention, take it seriously. That kind of thing.
You captured the religious aspect of Mexico so well too, like the scene with Jorge and the woman who plays his mother, where he's saying, I'm nothing, I'm not a husband or a father, and she's pleading with him not to turn his back on God. I mean, I thought that was a really important scene too, because that's such an important part of the culture. And that was a very believable scene.
Yeah, it's impossible to do a movie about Mexico and not have some sort of, Catholicism is just so central to it. And
it's part of the culture.
Yeah. And like you said, it's a movie about fathers and sons, but it's also about sons of mothers and sons. You have Andie and Jake have this relationship, and then then Jorge and his mom, they're the two backbones of their support system, I guess. And they both play a really, central part in them, in their redemption stories, or at least in their arcs.
Right. So what do you want people to take away from this film? I mean, what would be your ideal? And this is for everybody, in addition to obviously Jake, who wrote it, and Conor, who directed it, but what would you like people to be talking about when they come out?
I want to hear what everyone else has to say on this one. I'm curious.
Okay, we'll start with Andie.
Oh, wow. Thanks a lot. I love listening to other people's ideas and then, calculating, but, well, I think that, it's significant in seeing both sides of the stories. I don't think that there's ever an easy answer to something this complex. But I think that at the heart of it, without empathy, we are not humane. So I guess maybe that's what you take away from it. That's what I would take away from it. Humanity. I think we cannot lose touch of humanity. And being able to see suffering, that, there is, what kind of suffering is there, I think that so many stories could be told about this issue. And this is one great story that has been told, but there is definitely space for more stories. And it's such an interesting subject. Maybe more will follow, which would be nice.
Absolutely.
Jorge, what would you like people to take away from this?
You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, you're muted.
There we go.
I'm muted. I think the best example that I can give is what Jake and Conor just said about the dirt, the land, and the hormigas.
Ants, yeah.
The ants. I mean, that's it. That's it. Like, everything's there. Just with that example. I mean, just respect everyone. No one is better than anyone. I mean, we're humans, and I think everything will be different if everyone respected each other. Like, you respect your family, you should respect your neighbors, and you just keep going and going. I think that's very important. And I feel that this movie has a lot of that. I mean, if you think about it. So.
Yeah, and your character, I love the fact that he has the humanity that he does. I think that's important for people to see as well.
Yes, exactly.
Because I think we could all understand a sense of vengeance if something happens to your child, but to choose kindness or compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Also very,
yes.
Frank, what about you?
I got, like Andie said, there's just so much, there's so many things you can take away from this or attach an idea to, but symbolically, the thing about leaving the water, or leaving the blankets, and instead of having someone have to steal them, knowing they need them to survive. I think that's kind of the message. That's the message, to understand that, as human beings, we need to take care of one another. And sometimes the people who we put in charge to help us organize all of that and facilitate humanity, they're the worst culprits of creating dissension, and they're pervasive, and so there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot to be said. And this is this is the great thing about film. If this can be one little morsel of feeling something about the other side, whatever the other side is, it's we've done our job. One film was never going to change, or two films are never going to change the world, but that's how you can start. You know, it's, I have to say, not getting on my high horse, but I was out last night, oddly, with a couple of friends, 3 women. One of them was African-American and an African-American friend, and they were pro-Trump. And Mexico came up, and I was amazed at people's ignorance and point of view when it came to our exiting president and this situation in Mexico. This was clearly by coincidence. And it just getting on here today, it's like, wow, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do, a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Well, on that note, this is a perfect way to wrap up our Q&A. We do have work to do, but thank you so much for making a film that does open people's eyes, because I do think that is the power of film, that we can, you know, get people thinking. And if we can move the needle just a little bit, that's huge.
I thought the music was really good in this too, you guys. We didn't say anything about that, but
Yeah, it really was.
Really
music was good. You did a good job there too.
Blair Brothers.
Yeah, they did a wonderful job.
I mean, I didn't think you guys had any talent at all, and I'm amazed that you were able to make a film.
When I saw your movie, I was just blown away. Who would have
What
thought?
is funny, and I will say real quick before we go, because we didn't say anything about this, is how fast we shot.
Oh yeah.
How bare bones it was.
Yeah.
Really just like,
All right.
okay, we have 10 minutes to get this done, and we would do it. And and it's really the crew. I don't know. I really liked this crew. They were so laid back, and like where we would go eat lunch, it was super chill. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It had everything had a different essence to it. You knew you were in it. It felt really exotic in a way, because we were in Mexico. And I don't know, I wanted to move to San Miguel. I loved it so much.
Yeah.
That was all thrilling. And I didn't really care if it was good or not. I was having so much fun. That was just like, I loved the crew. I was like, man, I dig these guys. They're super cool to work with. I just was never uptight. Like everything was loosey goosey. You didn't have any time to, you just had to do it. And I trusted them for some reason, because I think I was having fun. And I was completely shocked. My God, it's good.
Yeah. And I got to say, being a father of 3 sons, it warms my heart to see these brothers doing their thing together. And they have an amazing father. And it's exciting. I'm excited for them, and it's beautiful to see they love each other and they're working together. It's great.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's an even better note to end on. The brotherly love. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jake and Conor, Andie, Jorge, and Frank. This has been great.
Yes.
Thank you for those of you watching for joining us in this screening to streaming edition of the Guadalajara Film Festival. And follow us on our website, ficginla.com, and on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at FICG in LA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody. Congratulations.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.